Chairman and to the ranking member of the committee and of the full committee. Well, first I want to start off by saying thank you to everybody who I know is in the middle of a grieving process right now for being here. This is an intimidating place to be in general, and to take the time to come and force everyone who sits on this committee and all of us who sit in Congress to stop and think about, we hear a lot about the stakeholders in this. Certainly everyone who gets onto a plane is a stakeholder in this, and so your voice is just as important here as the people who are in the industry making money and running businesses. So I appreciate you. And
Thank you.
as someone who's on this committee, I'm very committed to a thoughtful review of the entire process that's going on for us to, the responsibility that we have as members of Congress is not just to legislate, but also to perform oversight functions to keep people safe. And when I read through your testimony, there are two things I would love to hear both of you speak about, actually, is one, you talked a little bit already about who we should hear from, that the testimony should be from the engineers and from executives and whistleblowers and everybody. I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that in the context of how do we make sure that you have the trust of the industry, because so much of this is built on trust, and this is where we see a breakdown of that trust. The fact that you have to talk about earnings and statements and bringing your professional capacity of understanding that stuff into a conversation that really centers on how do we keep people safe is, I think, part of the trust conversation. And then the other thing that when I read your testimony, the fact that you said that Boeing has never reached out to the families really stuck out to me, and I would like to hear you comment on that publicly, because I think that's really important.
Well, yeah, I'll answer the second question first. Boeing, they've been in front of cameras acknowledging that there were mistakes in the installation of MCAS. Obviously, they don't talk about the flaws in the design of the 737 MAX. And they've apologized to the families in front of cameras. Now, they know who the next of kin of these victims are, but they've not come to us, and they've not apologized in person. Ethiopian Airlines did send letters to us, not to apologize, but to offer their sympathies and their messages of condolence. So the expectation is, it's hard to trust the Boeing, with their apologies, given that they've not reached out to us. And I do believe that they did that in the days leading up to the Paris Air Show, because it's for commercial reasons. I believe it's a publicity stunt that they just appeared on cameras to apologize to the families.
Yeah, I think the families are in agreement that Boeing's apologies to cameras have not been apologies to the families. We were in Ethiopia, our family, after the crash, and the Ethiopian Airlines sent letters. They invited us in. They were reaching out directly, and so it was very much warmer. And the recent offer of $100 million to something seemed like a PR stunt to us. They never reached out to families to discuss what the needs of the families are. And on the future hearings, the technical dissenters should be heard from, those who dissented from a potential groupthink forced consensus process at FAA. if any. If the committee has identified any, the public should hear them, not just the investigators. Any whistleblowers who may have been fired and maybe have a gag order pursuant to a settlement, who have complained about safety issues with regard to the 737 MAX, should be called to testify with protective subpoenas so the public can hear what they had to say and what their experience is. And the aviation software writers, do they have the same level of engineering safety culture that regular engineers, aviation safety engineers? Were getting more software in these planes. In this case, it took control of the plane and pushed it into the ground. We need triple redundancy in every part of these systems as they merge with, software and hardware. And do software writers really have that kind of culture? We need to hear who wrote that software and what they have to say and what their culture is. To reinforce what Michael said, for this committee to have achieved its objective, and that objective is to do a data investigation as to what happened within Boeing and the FAA, the weakness in their internal oversight processes, that a jet that is flawed was designed, certified, and allowed to fly. Then we need to hear from the technical dissenters, from the whistleblowers, the safety engineers as well.
Well, I'll just close by saying thank you again, Mr. Njorge and Mr. Stumo, for coming here and being the voices that are sharing with the members of Congress what we need to do to make sure that the trust of the folks who are getting on to planes exists. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have just two more members, Mr. Lynch and